So the one saving grace of finally seeing Renfield is that I won't have to watch that trailer I've seen about 1 billion times up until this point in front of almost every single movie I've gone to see at the theater. The other part to that is that if you've seen that trailer, and I'm sure you have, you've pretty much seen this movie already. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
What are you waiting for, huh? What are you waiting for?
So Renfield is a modern retelling slash sequel-ish to the classic Dracula story. In this movie, we follow the tortured servant of Dracula, Renfield, who is being forced to do his master's bidding. However, after centuries of servitude, he's ready to see if there's a life outside of the shadow of the Prince of Darkness. Now, the moment I hear about a classic tale getting modernized, it instantly makes me cringe. And that's not because it can't be done. I think if The Invisible Man 2020 taught us anything, it's that that concept can work under the right conditions. But more often than not, modernizing something typically comes at a price in modern Hollywood. And typically everything is stripped away from that story that made it memorable. And you are left with something that resembles that story in name only.
Why do these things always happen to me?
I think what Renfield does well is it doesn't necessarily try to reinvent the wheel. In fact, the events of the original Dracula from 1931 starring Bela Lugosi are treated as a prequel of sorts to this story. They even reenact shots from that movie using Nic Cage and Nicholas Hoult in place of the previous actors. Which I thought was pretty cool, but at the same time, it made me just want to go watch the original Dracula instead of watching this.
He will live through the centuries to come, as I have lived.
I think Renfield does present an interesting premise and a fresh spin on this classic story, although I don't know if the execution of that premise is exactly what I would have done in the same situation. To me, it just felt like they didn't go all in on the idea. It's like you're getting the Cliff Notes version of the story that they really wanted to tell you.
Put some effort into it!
Yes, in theory, it's interesting to think about a modern Renfield going to group therapy and trying to escape this toxic relationship he has with Dracula. But when it's actually playing out in the film, it's played more for laughs. And the struggle that he's going through feels a bit understated to me. I actually thought that Nicholas Hoult did a great job playing the tortured Renfield. I guess I just wish he wasn't so handcuffed by this very basic script. I think he had a lot more to offer the character if they allowed him to do so.
That makes sense.
As for Nic Cage as Dracula, he's about as over the top as you would expect him to be. I realize that Nic Cage is hired to be Nic Cage in most of his movies now. He's basically a walking meme at this point, but I was kind of hoping his Dracula would be a bit more formidable, a bit more intimidating. And again, it's more played up for laughs, and his very weird performance plays into that.
I couldn't think of a more horrible job if I wanted to.
I mean, we got the crazy Nic Cage facial expressions, then we got the Dracula accent dropping in and out, and I understand that it's supposed to be a comedy, but it was just a bit too goofy for me personally. And I would have preferred if they at least tried to balance things out just a little bit with some legitimate horrific moments. Speaking of accents dropping in and out, Awkwafina is in this movie for some reason.
Follow the queen, live your dream, but don't sleep. Don't sleep. Because she might disappear, saw that?
Her inclusion is especially strange because the story for her character feels very shoehorned in. It's a subplot that was very clearly added just to give this story a bit more of a human element. But it's pretty much the most cliche story possible for a loner cop who's been done wrong and she wants revenge on the people who did her wrong. Not to mention, I find Awkwafina to be pretty obnoxious in most things that she's in. Everything she says is just so forced and out of place to me, and she might be the least believable cop in the history of cinema.
What the hell am I looking at? When does this happen in the movie?
The movie does have some decent kills, which is probably the highlight of it. There's lots of dismemberments and beheadings, and there's one particular kill that looks like it was ripped right out of an anime. Although they do lose some points for using CGI blood a bit too much, because I can't stand when they do that. I mean, is it really that hard to make fake blood? They use it in other scenes in this movie. Why not just make a little bit more and make these kills just a little bit better?
But why?
The therapy or mental health side of this movie is where I thought it would shine or get really annoying depending on how they pulled it off. In reality, it's somewhere in between those two things, and it doesn't really do enough to leave much of an impression. Everything in this movie feels very surface deep. In fact, I got a very strong teen fiction vibe from it. I almost got a Warm Bodies feel to it, which is a zombie love story that also stars Nicholas Hoult, by the way.
Coincidence? I think not!
I realize that this movie is a dark comedy and is supposed to be funny, but it is that modern quirky humor, which is the only way I really know how to describe it, and that approach is always not all that appealing to me, or funny for that matter. In the end, Renfield does offer some fresh ideas, but ultimately comes up short in delivering those ideas. This movie feels like it has too many moving parts, while also somehow simultaneously feeling too basic. I think it would have benefited from having a more focused approach, rather than just incorporating things seemingly randomly just to appease modern audiences. I would have preferred if they handled at least some of the more heavy subject matter just a little bit seriously. There is an interesting story to be told here, which is a shame because it makes Renfield feel like a bit of a missed opportunity. Like if this movie was made by 1980s or 90s Tim Burton, it probably would have been pretty memorable.
It's showtime.
I'm sure some people are going to have fun with it, but for me personally, it just didn't hold my interest. In fact, I was bored throughout most of it. I actually didn't have very strong feelings either way as it pertains to loving it or hating it, so that's why I'm going to give it the Careless Sam Gerard.
I don't care! Y'all be cool. Right on.